So today we're going to discuss about slope and writing equations of lines. So as you take these notes, please pause the video if it goes too fast. So some things we've talked about with slope is you need to know the word rate of change. Also, you need to know that the change is a constant. So this rate of change is going to stay the same. Sometimes you're going to add numbers to that, which means it would be a positive slope. If you're subtracting numbers constantly, it would be going down, which is a negative slope. So you're basically asking yourself, how does your y change and how does your x change? When we look at this question and you look at your y change, you're asking yourself, how would you go from -1 to 1? So it would be increasing, so we need to be adding something. So when you're looking at adding something, you're trying to think about, is that number going to stay constant between all the y changes? So when you're going from -1 to 1, you can add 2. When you're going from 1 to 3, you can add 2. When you're going from 3 to 5, you can add 2. And when you're going from 5 to 7, you can add 2. So when you're looking at that, your y value is changing by 2. So now we're going to ask ourselves, how does the x change? So here we would be adding 1. These numbers are getting bigger as well. Then I would be adding 1 again. Then I am adding 1. And I am adding 1. So what you notice here is the number that you are adding is always going to be the same. So notice that your y change is always 2. Your x change is always 1. So that's going to remain constant. So then you reduce that to the number 2. When you see a word problem, a lot of times you see the word per. And that's going to tell you that you would have the slope. So in this problem, maybe a taxi cab is charging 25 cents per mile. So that would mean that 25 cents per mile. That would be your slope. So your slope would be 25 cents. So that would mean that every mile you're paying an additional 25 cents. So we're going to say when you first start, you went 0 miles. So you owe nothing. After mile 1, you're going to owe 25 cents. So after 2 miles, you're going to owe 50 cents. 3 miles would be 75 cents. And 4 miles would be $1. So notice how it is changing 25 cents every mile. So that would be your slope. If you are given 2 points and you are trying to find the slope, you want to make sure that you use the formula with your change in y over your change in x. So if we had the point -3, 2 and 4, 5, and we're trying to find the slope, remember that this is your x, the first x, this is your second x, this is your first y, this is your second y. So you're going to start with y2. So it's going to be 5, and you're going to put a minus sign. Then you're going to do y1, which is 2. Then you're going to go to your x2, which is a 4. You're going to put a minus sign, and you're going to put -3. Anytime you have the double negatives beside each other, that's like a negative times a negative, which would be a positive. 5 minus 2 is 3. 4 plus 3 is 7. Make sure you reduce your slopes. So the slope of that line would be 3/7. Since it is a positive slope, that tells me the line should be increasing. So the line should be going up when it is positive. Sometimes it is asking for the slope between specific intervals. And you might see something that has between the interval 2 and 5. So what this means is if you're talking between two intervals, this is meaning that your x is 2. So remember, if we do that, it's f of 2. So if my x is 2, we need to look for the y value. So if you look here, the x is 2, the y is 3. So f of 2 equals 3 means the point 2, 3. So if I'm looking at this value, if you notice, that was my x is 2. This one is now my x is equal to 5. So what is your y value when x is equal to 5? Well, your y value would be -2. So to write that in function notation, f of 5 equals -2. So remember that the inside is your input, which is your x. The outside is your output, which is your y. So if I was to look at this, and we had this line, and you're looking for those points, that is what you're looking for, the points on the graph. Now, you're trying to calculate the slope of those points now. So if you notice, your point is 2, 3, and your other ordered pair is 5, -2. So now that I have my 2 points, I'm going to go above and use the formula. So we have y2, which is -2 minus 3. So we did -2 minus 3. Now we're going to do our x, so it would be 5 minus 2. So -2 minus 3 is -5. 5 minus 2 is 3. So our slope is -5/3. So if we went down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I went down 5, then I go over 1, 2, 3. So this would be down 5, this would be right 3. And that would be your slope for that line. Okay, now remember in Desmos, you can find the slope if you would like to use that by making a table in Desmos. And when you make your table, then you're going to have to know that this is the formula that you're going to type in, and the M is what you're looking for when it is asking for the slope. So when it does ask just for the slope, do not put the X with it. That just tells you where that is going to be located if it is in an equation. So what that means is if you're given an equation and it is asking you to find the slope. If this was your equation, 2x minus 4, and it said in the directions, what is the slope? You would need to find the number in front of the x, make sure y is completely by itself, and your slope would be the number 2. Okay? Okay, so what I'd like you to do right now is to call up your Desmos, and I'm going to share my screen and we're going to take a look at typing those in and calculating our slope again from using Desmos. Okay, so I'm going to share the screen. And if you'll call up Desmos Graphing Calculator. Okay, remember we're going to hit this little plus sign when we're making our table. We're going to go down and pick the T-chart table. So I'm going to type in 2 of the points that we did a while ago. So let's go back to, I think I gave you 2 ordered pairs just a few minutes ago, and we were looking at this specific example. -3, 2, and 4, 5. And we said the slope was 3/7. So I'm going to put in a -4, a -3, excuse me. I think, yeah, that went. And then a +4. And then I'm going over here and I'm going to put the 2 and the 5. Okay. So now when I see this over here with my screen, when I'm looking at those 2 points there that are graphed, there's a few things that I'm going to show you with the computer. So if you remember, we can go to click the edit. We're going to go to the Y1. You can actually draw the line if you want to connect the points. Okay, so you can see here that then I could count. So I could go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So that would actually reduce to 3/7. So when I'm looking at that, let's go and click on the next line and we'll do Y1, change that to lowercase. And then I'm going to go to squiggle and then MX. All you have to do is hit the number 1 and it'll do a subscript and then plus B. So now it has drawn the whole line for you. Okay. So when I minimize this right here, you can see that it tells you the slope is 0.428571. So if you needed to match up and see what kind of fraction that would be, one thing you can do is type that number into the computer. And if you hit the toggle button, you get this really weird fraction, okay? That's because this decimal is continuing. The computer just rounded it off. So when you're looking at those, sometimes it's very important to know the other methods. But if it is multiple choice and you were to type in 3 divided by 7, you'll see that that is the decimal right here. It's just they rounded that off some. So you would be able to match that up, okay? So you can see how those decimals are the same. Okay, so that'll help you kind of compare as you are going through. So I'm going to stop sharing that. And as I go back to the main screen here, if you needed to copy that information down, please do so. So now we're going to look at the y-intercept. Now, when we've talked about the y-intercept, that is telling me where the line or where any graph would touch the y-axis. So it's where any graph or line is going to touch your y-axis. It's where it's going to intercept it. So what you do to find the y-intercept is you're going to let x equal 0, and you're going to look for y. So if we were to look at a graph, Remember, this is your y-axis. That's your range. So if I put a point right there at 4, then I'm going to go up over here on the x, and I'm going to put a point at 4. Now, it's very important for you to know how to put ordered pairs because they will ask you on your test about x and y intercepts. So if it touches the y-axis, notice that the 0 is in x's spot. The y is going to be your 4. That is what your y-intercept is. The y-intercept is where it touches your y-axis, and your x is going to be 0. To find the x-intercept, your y is going to be 0. So notice that it is the opposite letter. So if you are looking for y, you're going to have the 4 in y spot. If you are looking for x, the 4 is going to be in the x's spot. So pay attention to that because that can be easily confused. So it's very important for you to know that is not the slope of the line, okay? When you go back and you think about the slope that we were discussing, you would do falling down 1, 2, 3, 4. So you go down 4, and then you go 1, 2, 3, 4, and you go right 4. So the slope of that line would be -1. So it's very important to ask what the question is. Ask yourself what the question is asking you, or you don't get that confused. So remember, when the lines go down, your slope is negative. Okay. Another thing about your y-intercept is if you have an equation, the b is the y-intercept. So what we was discussing a while ago is if you have the slope-intercept equation, and it could have f of x in place of y, remember that f of x and y are the same thing. The m we just talked about was the slope. This letter b right here is the y-intercept. That is where the line is going to touch the y-axis. Now, the y-intercept is always going to be like an initial start. So when you're graphing lines, that is where you're going to start. When you look at word problems, it's probably going to have something about initial, and that is where you're going to start with that problem. So a while ago, when we was talking about the taxi, we'll say that maybe the taxi charged, let's say they charged an initial fee. So we'll say it was an initial fee of $25, okay? And then they are charging 25 cents per mile. So if you remember that, the initial fee is going to be the y-intercept. That is where you're going to have that fee up front. Sometimes it's called an upfront charge. It's what you have to pay the company. And after you give them the $25, they're going to charge you 25 cents for every mile that you travel. The 25 cents was the slope, okay? The $25 was the upfront. So remember, the per is that constant change with your slope. Now, when you go to Desmos and you type in that information again, you would look for the letter B. B would be the y-intercept. So basically, when you're putting the equation of the line, you have to find the information in the order that I just spoke about. the first thing is you want to find the slope. Remember that your letter for slope is M. Then you're going to find the y-intercept. Remember that the letter for your y-intercept is the B. Then you are going to plug in your M and your B, and you have your equation of the line. Now, in scatter plots, remember when the data is scattered, you have what is called a correlation factor, okay? So the correlation factor is your R. And that factor is going to tell you how good your data is. So remember that that R factor is going to go between -1 and +1. -1 is very strong in the weak sense, which means it's a perfect negative slope. Okay. +1 is perfect in the positive direction because it's a +1. And then the further the points are away from the line, the weaker the correlation. So as you think about your scatter plots, when you plug that in, it will probably ask you about that correlation factor. Okay, so when you're thinking about that, remember in Desmos, you're going to have to know this formula. And then you're going to look at your R, not your R squared. Okay. Okay, so the last thing we're going to take a look at is how to do these algebraically. And then we will compare those answers into our Desmos graphing calculator as we finish our lesson. So I've reviewed over how to find the slope. So we want to make sure that we know how to do that. Then we've talked about what an ordered pair is. So an ordered pair is your X before your Y. Your slope formula, I'll rewrite that again. And these are things you need to start getting in your memory as you're getting ready for your test. The new formula for today that you have not saw is what is called point slope. Okay, you can use point slope to find the equation of the line, but what you have to know is you have to know two things. You have to know the slope, and that's going to go in for M. You also have to know the ordered pair, which is any ordered pair that you want to pick from the line. Those are going to go in for your Y1 and your X1. So when you plug this into that point slope, after you have plugged this in, you're going to distribute. And then the last thing is you're going to isolate the Y. And you will be able to have that in Y equals mx plus b. Okay, so when we go through this problem in just a minute, algebraically, we will call back up Desmos and check it. Okay, so if you'll have that kind of called up as well. Okay, so you see that we have 2 points and we're trying to write an equation of the line. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to find the slope. So we're going to have 1 minus -1. On bottom, we would have -1 minus -2. Now remember, when the two double negatives are directly beside each other, change those to positives. So 1 plus 1 is going to be 2. -1 plus 2 is going to be 1. So we have a slope of 2. Now remember that your goal is to try to put the equation into Y equals mx plus b form, because we're writing an equation of the line. Now, when you think about using your point slope formula, okay, you have to know that it's just your y's first, just like when you find your slope. And then you're going to have your m x minus x. Okay, so if you think back to what the slope formula was, I'll show you how you can get that from this. If you remember when we put a 1 up under this and we cross multiplied, when you multiply by 1, you would just get that back, y2 minus y1. And then when you cross multiply the other side, you'll see your m is multiplied to your x's. And make sure you drop your subscript of the 2's because you don't need that. You only need one ordered pair, okay? Both ordered pairs are going to be on the line, but we only need one of those. So I'm going to pick either point. So you can pick either point. I'm just going to circle that one. Now I'm going to highlight where you're going to put these as you're following along. So it's y minus y equals m x minus x. Y minus y equals m x minus x. Y minus y. So y minus y equals m x minus x. Y minus y equals m x minus x. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to bring down the y minus 1. Now, before you distribute, if you see the two double negatives beside each other, make sure you fix that. 2 times x is 2x. 2 times 1 is 2. And then the last thing is to isolate your y. So I'm going to add the 1 to both sides to get rid of the subtraction. So y is going to equal 2x plus 3. Now, when you get this equation, it should work with your data. So when you go back and you think about your ordered pairs, if you were to put -2 in for x, you would do 2 times -2 plus 3. And notice that you get -1. So that ordered pair is correct. So we want to check the other ordered pair. So we're going to put in a -1. So 2 times -1 plus 3. And that gives you 1. So this tells me that is correct. Now, I'm going to share the screen and again show you how you can type this in to double check your answers, because this was some of the questions that some of you had prior to our break. So when I go back to the calculator, I'm going to go ahead and make a table, and you might want to do this when you do your assignment. I'm going to put a -2 and a -1, and then I've got a -1 and a 1. So a few ways you can check this. So you could, try to count for your slope and then try to find your y-intercept from that point. You could type in your answer and see if it goes through both points. So I'm going to type that in. We'll see if it passes through both points. That was what you was trying to do. Find an equation of a line that's going to go through both of those points. You can see that it passes through both points. Now, if I did not know that equation, I can go up here and, whoops, didn't mean to do that. Let me put -1 back. So I'm going to put in y1, squiggle, mx1 plus b. So when I go down here, just like with the scatter plots, you can see that the slope is 2 and the y-intercept is 3. So since you know the slope and the y-intercept, you can directly plug those numbers in and it would go through those points. So you can see that would be correct there. Okay? So I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Now, sometimes it might just give you 1 point and a slope. So if it gives you 1 point and a slope, notice that this point is not the y-intercept. If that point was the y-intercept, you could go straight to writing the equation of your line. So if you remember when we covered that, some of our questions had like possibly the slope is 3 and the y-intercept might be 2. And remember, all we had to do here was plug those numbers in. So you would have y equals 3x plus 2. Now the y-intercept could be given as a 0, 2. And you could go straight to doing that the same exact way. But if you don't know the y-intercept, you're going to have to either use point slope or you're going to have to graph it and use your slope to help you find the y-intercept. The only problem is sometimes your y-intercept might be fractions or decimals, and you might need to know the algebra because it's harder to find those at times. So if I'm looking at this one, remember it's y minus y equals mx minus x. So you want to use that formula when you don't know the y-intercept. And this is definitely not the y-intercept. That would lie, if you were to graph 4, negative 2, that would lie in quadrant 4. Okay, so we're going to have to plug in. So as we plug in, if you remember, you're going to plug in the y here, the slope, and then the x. So it's going to be y minus negative 2. Then you have your slope. Your slope is 3. X minus 4. Now, before you do any algebra, change your double negatives to pluses. Whoops. Now you're going to distribute your 3. So you have 3x minus 12. Now we're going to subtract the 2. And you're going to get 3x minus 14. So notice that that y-intercept is going to be way down at negative 14. So let me share the screen and we will check this answer. So we'll clear this out. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just make a table and I'm going to put in the ordered pair. So I've got a 4 and I've got a negative 2. And I want the slope to go through that point, and I want it to have a slope of 3. Okay, so let's see if what I got was right. So if you notice, kind of move that on down. When I'm typing that in, it is going to touch right there at negative 14, and it is going to go through that point. So let's say that we wanted to check it using a table from this equation. So if you would hit that right there, I'm going to go back and I'm going to go to the settings. And when I do the settings, I'm going to create a table for that equation. So when I'm creating that table, the thing has to go through, the line has to go through 4, -2. So see, it goes through 4, -2. And notice it has a slope of 3. So when I go back, I think we had that here. You could go back and you could count and see down 1, 2, 3 over 1, down 1, 2, 3 over 1. And you could keep counting till you got to the -14. It just takes a little bit of time when these numbers are going to be larger or very small, and sometimes with fractions. So that's why you might want to know that formula at times. Okay, so as you try these problems today, make sure that you upload the notes, that you have watched the video, and good luck on your practice.